Welcome to Coffee and Conversations, mini episodes by victims and villains, and on this episode we are discussing the 2021 fantastical drama The Waterman, which is the directorial debut from David Oyelowo, and I am your co-host, Captain Nostalgia.
And I am your co-host, Black Nerd Magic.
What's up, man?
Everything is just going peachy in this pandemic world we're living in. Just recently got my first shot of the vaccine, so I'm one step away from being fully vaccinated, and that's a good thing. Also, I've been, as usual, watching a lot of films, reading a lot of books, and just generally living life the best way I can, even though there's self-imposed limits on the outside.
Yeah, that is. I can definitely feel the whole limitations there. But no, man, life is good, and I'm really anxious to hear your thoughts on this movie. Because this was not a movie. This movie didn't actually end up unwinding the way that I originally thought it was. What I thought was like a title like The Waterman, I was like, okay, cool. We're either gonna get like something that's gonna be like in like the superhero realm, or this is gonna be more fantasy, and that's not the case for this movie.
No, I felt the same way when I saw the title The Waterman. I originally had thought, or maybe I could be right, is it based on a book?
I mean, it might be. I don't know too terribly much about this movie. According to Google, the movie's description is: hoping to save his sick mother, a boy ventures into the remote Wild Horse Forest to search for a mythical figure who possesses the secret to immortality.
Yeah, it sounds like something that would be in a children's fantasy book. So for me, I came in just with the expectations that it was going to be a film that definitely would probably play better for children, even though there are strong adult themes. Like, this is almost like something that Pixar or maybe a DreamWorks would make if it was an animated form. So I came in here with no expectations. I am aware of David Oyelowo. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that wrong. I'm aware of his career. He starred in one of my favorite films from 2014 called Selma, and he has shown up in a lot of films over the past few years, just a supporting character and as a lead for a few times. So I'm always excited to see actors when they first step behind the camera.
Yeah, this one was something that really interested me to see what he was going to be like particularly as a director, because his turn as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is just transformative. I mean, it is just acting at its peak. And he's also shown up in other films that we're both fans of: Rise of the Planet of the Apes. He also was in Interstellar very briefly, just kind of going through his filmography now. The Cloverfield Paradox, A Wrinkle in Time. Also did Gringo, Don't Let Go, The Waterman. He was also in Chaos Walking, which still ranks as one of my least favorite movies of this year. You guys can read my review. I tore into that movie, man. At victimsandvillains.net/reviews. But the thing about Oyelowo is that every time he shows up, even if it's in this like small capacity, like, he always makes an impression. Like, Interstellar is a great example. Interstellar, he's in that movie for like 10 minutes of a near 3-hour film, and yet I always remember him as the principal of Murphy's School. And so I was really curious to see what he would be able to do as a director. He also stars in this movie, but he's not actually in the movie too terribly long. And I'm really glad that he was able to stretch his feet as a director. And we'll talk about just how much of how good or how bad he was as a director, as a first-time director, because this is his debut. But what are your kind of general thoughts coming out of this movie?
I think it's a cute fantasy film. honestly, there are so many elements in the story that remind me of a lot of the films that were made in the 1980s, such as The Goonies and E.T. Like, there are certain bits of it where it does feel like a little bit of a coming of age story, but the main emphasis is on this little kid who is facing a dilemma at home. His mother is sick with leukemia, and anybody who knows about cancer, I mean, it sucks. And so he sees that even his own father and everybody around him, even the nurses, are giving up on his mother, like, living. Like, they've already pretty much resigned to the fate that she's going to die. And so this spurs him on a journey to go deep into the woods to find this so-called waterman who has a stone that can be allowed to bring somebody who is dead back to life. And so we set off on that. And for the most part, I think it does a good job of keeping your attention, of definitely showing you some strong themes. And I do like the little kid, the guy who plays Gunner. He's a really good young actor. I would like to see more of him in the future. And we get Rosario Dawson, who has always been a favorite of mine. She's in here. Then we get Alfred Molina, Doc Ock. And so we also get Mario Bella. I think that's how you say her name, as playing the cop. So there was a good bundle of supporting performances, and I did like the lead performances. My only issues, which we can get into, a little bit later, is that I think there was only one character that had any bit of backstory, development, and presence, and all the other characters were written just very light. I did find that some of the story can kind of bounce around from being just kind of downright compassionate to being cheesy and kind of a little bit gimmicky, especially when it comes towards the end. And it's kind of by the numbers in a special way. I mean, this story has been seen countless times before. There are new wrinkles to it that does make it stand out a little bit, but it's nothing too much that I think it leaves the ground fully ascending into the sky. But hey, it's a decent film, and in this day and age, decent is still good.
Yeah, so Lonnie Chavis is the young actor that plays Gunner in this movie, and I agree, he is a standout in this film. The cast is just ridiculously stacked. I can't remember the last time I saw Mario Bello in a film to any capacity outside of like Secret Window, which was the early 2000s. And she used to do just so much acting in just showing up in random films throughout the first 10 years of the millennium. And then she just kind of disappeared. So it was nice to see her come back. Really liked seeing Rosario Dawson. She's always such a great presence in anything you place her in, whether it's live action or animated. David Oyelowo obviously plays the father Amos in this one. And then you also have other characters in this that I kind of didn't feel. I really felt that, like, your paint by numbers comment, especially when you're talking about the Amir Miller, who plays Joe in this, and then kind of like as the film unfolds, like the fantastical starts to become a little bit more grounded, and then by the time we reach the end, all the fantasy of this movie is kind of gets sucked out a little bit, and that's the part that I feel like hurt me the most, is that this film just definitely feels like it suffers from a loss of identity in its tone, and I wanted so much more for this, and I wish that Alfred Molina, for as little bit in this movie as he is, and it's, sorry listeners, stand corrected, is Maria Bella. I have the IMDb page pulled up now. Alfred Molina definitely leaves a huge impact on this one. But I think the burning question of this entire film and thing that both drew us to want to bring coverage to this movie was the directorial debut of Oyelowo. So how do you feel like he did as a first-time director?
I think he did a good job. There's a moment in I think towards the second half of the film, where we have this scene where Joe and Gunnar go inside this tent, and I really just love the way that it's shot. Like they have them both set up with a medium close up, and the camera kind of cuts back between them having this conversation, and then the tent is also lit up in a very bright way, which speaks to the fantasy elements of the story. So that was one shot that stuck out to me. I generally just love the way that David handled the pacing of this film. He is able to keep you engaged enough to where you want to see what happens with this kid. You want to see where this story goes. And there's also some emotional detail into this. You know, we get the sense that this father and son, they're not in the best of spots right now as far as the relationship. And we see how this kid, you know, one thing I like to talk about is that when we have black characters often in films, most of the time they are stuck playing the same kind of prejudgy, limited stereotypes, especially when it comes to black kids. You know, sometimes when there's a coming of age story involving a black kid, we see a black kid, he's doing something. He's a bad delinquent kid, or he's in crime, or he's selling drugs, or he's doing just like illicit things. But we see in here that this kid has interest in reading. We see him with a Sherlock Holmes book. We see him drafting up a graphic novel, and it's a very good story about how he's writing about a detective who's trying to solve his own murder. And we see him like he's an intelligent kid who loves books, and he's adventurous, and we see him just be a normal kid. And I really like that amount of detail. I like that David was able to tap into showing black kids being kids, because oftentimes black kids are just often shown as being more older than they are. And I also like that Gunnar had a sidekick who was white, you know, Joe. And I know towards the beginning of the film, they're like at whist with each other, but that's what kids do. But over time they get closer together, and I thought that was great to see that without that being brought up as a statement or a message or a plot point. Like, no, it's just two kids who are interested in this myth or urban legend about the Waterman, and they're set off on a quest to find it.
Yeah, the relationship and the dynamic between Gunnar and Joe makes the film feel a whole lot more natural, because when you're a kid, you really don't care. At least when I was growing up, I didn't really care about races or sexes. Like, I just went to go hang out with whoever was in the neighborhood. Like, that's just what you did. And same thing when you went to school, you just hung out with whoever was in close proximity. And so having that dynamic woven into the film's story allows that to be really natural. And the particular shot that you're talking about in the tent, I also really dug that shot. There's a lot of vibrance that Oyelowo is able to bring to this. And there's also, too, I really enjoyed the way that, he would move the camera set up certain shots. I think that they really did a good job at kind of bringing the audience along for this emotional ride. And I think that's definitely one of the highlights that he definitely is able to secure himself as a director, is that he brings a emotion to these characters in the way that he moves the camera and the fluidity of it, of how he sets up shots and how they move on from scene to scene and transition from storyline to storyline. You as the audience are able to be inducted into this storyline with Gunnar, with Joe, with the Boone family. Especially this one for me also hit because I lost my grandmother to leukemia too, and just kind of seeing someone go through that on screen for the first time, it's terrifying. There's a scene in particular where Rosario Dawson, who has leukemia, is getting ready to take a shower, and Gunnar accidentally walks in on her or sees her reflection, and she's just completely hairless because of all the just all the treatments, and it's terrifying for him. And I think that's also one of the scenes that I feel was just shot really well. It really, really felt a lot of that emotion.
Yes, there's also another scene that accompanies that, where we see this kid It's almost like his innocence gets taken away because he goes to the library and he turns in all the books that he had been reading, these mystery books, Sherlock Holmes and everything. And the librarian is like, well, are you really done with all these books? He's like, no, I want to change them out for something different. Then immediately the next shot, we see him come home and open up a human body book. He's trying to learn about how to beat, the disease that his mom has because he doesn't want to lose his mom. And I felt that in another movie that would have been handled in a kind of a cheesy kind of, hey, let's just show the kid right beside his mother in the bedside crying his eyes out and everything, and the mother saying, oh, baby, it's going to be okay. Like, no, this kid took an initiative to actually go and set about figuring out a way of how his mother could beat cancer. And I thought it's heroic, but it's also very sad because this kid, he kind of loses his innocence in a way because he starts to learn about life and death. And life and death is a big theme of this film, and that gets hammered down more in the third act. And I like how David, he doesn't make it too obvious about that being the message. It's kind of just there in the narrative, but the way the use of the characters and the way some of these shots are angled and how the story unfolds, then by the end you kind of understand what the big themes and the big symbolisms that were going on in the film.
Can I just say that moment in the bookshop where he asks for the leukemia books and all the books that she had on cancer, I legitimately wanted to cry. I felt myself on the verge of tears because, again, that line, just the way that they wrote Gunnar and just his entire overall arc throughout the course of the film is just handled so beautifully. And I think that the setting up of the script and Yellow's camera angles, but also Charvis's performance, all three of those are just like a holy trinity. And this film really weaponizes that and uses it to its advantage to create a deep emotional level that could have just been otherwise a Goonies ripoff, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but my one criticism I do have when it comes to the way the story is handled is just how Gunnar, he's a developed character. We get that he has these likes, he has his dislikes. He's on clearly a journey of exploration and finding out things about life that he didn't understand before. But I felt that his sidekick Joe should have had that same kind of exploration, and she just didn't get it. I mean, we'll get into it when we get into spoilers, but I felt that the sidekick could have been better written.
Let's jump into spoilers right now, because that too was one of my biggest complaints about this, where we first meet Joe and she's trying to con, it's like 6 to 8 kids that are probably 8 or 9, and she's trying to con them into how she made it out of the presence of the water man, and so she's embellishing the tall tale. And I just knew from the moment that they kind of started explaining this that she had to be a child of abuse, and lo and behold, she was, and she just felt very one note, and she really helped the film. She really brought down the film, and really kind of clung to that paint by numbers routine that we've seen so many times. Her character just felt the most generic to me.
Yes, it was simple. Not much thought given into her character. You could tell by the end that they had to put something in there to kind of explain the reason why she has a scar on her ear and the reason why she is out in the forest all alone. But I never got the sense of what Joe really likes to do. At the end of the day, she's still a kid, so she has things that she enjoys doing. We see that for herself, she likes eating candy. So there's one character trait, but anything else, you pretty much don't know anything about. It's pretty much given to you by other characters, and the only way we figure out what's wrong with her is there's a scene where the cop goes up to her dad who's living in his trailer, and then we end up finding out, oh, he's abusive, and he may be a racist as well, and he's not a good father figure, so that's why she left away from home. But we don't get that scene of her explaining that. We don't get her navigating through her emotions doing that. A scene of where she's talking to Gunnar, and Gunnar's talking about how he's going through things with his mom, and then she could be like, well, you're not the only one who's facing a crisis at home. Like my father, you could have had something in there where you could have given the actor a chance to really expand on her character. But I think it's sadly it's a lost opportunity, because these two kids could have just been, both of them could have been the anchor for the film, honestly.
Yeah, and we spend so much time with these characters that you feel like they should be the anchor of the film, and you have, like you had said, like Gunner's a very developed character, and then you turn around and Joe kind of almost feels like an updated version of like the Angelica Pickles archetype from Rugrats, where she has to be the center of attention, she has to have everything. And at the end of the day, like there's something that makes her the way that she is, and it's just kind of written off as like no big deal. But I mean, a lot of this film is you have that emotional core of the Boone family, and I feel like for me it's not just the characterization of Joe, but it's also a large portion of the Boone family. Like the relationship between Amos and Gunner kind of also falls into that paint by numbers predictable category for me, where it's like I knew by the end of this film, from the very first shot that they have that together, that by the end of this film, their journey is going to be them reconnecting. Like, and lo and behold, that's what it was. And then, it's like, oh, plot twist, where we're also gonna have this this young girl, the sidekick, adopt it, and we're gonna be a family of 4 now. Like, it felt so predictable. This film had everything going for it, and then by the time it reached its third act, I just kind of felt like it just stopped. Like, its emotional core, it stopped. Its fantastical elements, it just stopped everything. It's just like kind of just like started to walk to the finish line.
Speaking of that third act, we need to get into that twist. So it turns out at the end of the film that never was no Waterman. He only existed in the mind of Gunner, that he imagined all of these events transpiring because he had hope, and hope can sometimes make you believe even in the most grandest of things. But for me, I felt that it was a gimmick, for one. I felt like that the writing had tried to get a little bit too cute and clever and having something that was going to blow the audience away. But for me, it just felt so cheap, especially given that we see scenes of Gunner obviously seeing these pieces of rock that are all over the forest. And Joe is clearly seeing these same things too. So was Joe imagining all of this as well? Or, I mean, I didn't understand exactly what they were going for as far as the twist. I would have rather it been a case where they get to the house and they see that there was a guy who used to live there, but the guy he's died. And I guess it's just a folk tale that had been passed down from generation to generation. Instead of just going the idea of like, oh, it was all in his head, blah blah blah. Like I didn't like the way that the film shifted away from being fantasy to just being another grounded film where a guy's just having his imagination just run amok.
Yo, it was such a cop out too. Like the scene where he's in the shelter of the quote unquote Waterman, and like it's revealed that like he's been envisioning this like whole thing. I'm like, what? Did you just like try the Sixth Sense in 2021? Like,
they did.
For real? Like, come on, man. Like we've grown past this motif of it was all a dream, it was all a vision. Like, come on, we're better than that. And especially how good this film is up till this third act, where it's just, man, like this third act just really raises the stakes. Like, how did you feel also to the third act? Should be noted that it also introduces a wildfire that has to set Amos into the forest to go rescue Gunner and Joe. I personally was not a fan of it. I felt like it added way too much to this. And also, I feel like the Alfred Molina character was wasted in this movie because they undid all of the fantastical elements, which is so sad because Alfred Molina was so freaking good in this movie. For the very brief time he's in here, he's in this movie just as much as he is in Promising Young Woman. But I digress. How did you feel about the wildfire?
What's funny is that when the wildfire came up on the screen, and I turned to my girlfriend and I told her, this is going to be the reason why him and his son get back together again. This is nothing but just a ploy for Amos to have the opportunity to have that moment to where he sacrifices everything and he shows his child that he loves him and he's devoted to him and that everything's going to be fine from here on out. And sure enough, that's what it did. But the sad thing about it is that for that relationship, they didn't show enough of the moments of dysfunction between the father and son. In the beginning, we just only learned that Amos is back from the military. Who knows how long he's been out of the military at this point, that he came back from Japan, and just that him and his son just don't have a good relationship. But why? Like, what's going on? Is the father working so much that he never sees his son? Could it be the reason that his mom is sick, that the family is kind of fractured? But it doesn't seem that way because the mother has a great relationship with her son. And it seems like the mother and Amos are having a good relationship even through all the troubles they're dealing with. But when it comes to Amos and Gunnar, we don't get many scenes between them. We only get 3 scenes between them before Gunnar runs away, and then they're only reunited by the end of the film. It's like the movie didn't do enough to make that moment of Amos and Gunnar coming back together earned. It wasn't earned to me. I felt like I needed to see more fabric with that story.
Oh, I absolutely 100% agree. I felt like they didn't lay enough down for the emotional foundation. Like, the film opens up and we get to understand the dynamic between Rosario and Rosario Dawson's character as the mother and Gunnar. Like, they set that up so well. And then we move into, Amos is the father that is having trouble adjusting to new life in the country, and he's also taking care of his dying wife while also trying to raise a son. So he's stressed, and so I understand like where he was coming from as far as like stress and like, you know, just kind of feeling the burnt out, and but also like just feeling like he just, no matter how much he gave, it was never enough kind of feeling. I feel like Oyelowo does a good job as to illustrate that to the audience, but by the time that you end up having the whole wildfire situation, like it's like this is the crux that's going to bring them two together. Like, why? Like, it felt so unneeded and so out of place. Also, now that I'm thinking about it, this third act and the way that it resolves is the same exact third act from the Rugrats movie. Just want to throw that out there.
Speaking of Rugrats movie, I haven't seen that since, well, I was a kid, so I can't even remember what the ending of that was. But yes, for me, just the film was on a crash course to being a very good film until, you know, the finish kind of deflates it. And also, what is the reason in these films for having cop characters if you're not going to use them? Like, there's a cop character in this film, and all she really is there to do is just be a person, be like, okay, we gotta go find Gunnar. Hey, do you know where this kid is? I don't understand it. It's like, why can't there never be an interesting cop character when it comes to films like this? Like, have a cop do more than just trying to find a kid. How about show her working around the office, you know, being in camaraderie with her other coworkers. It's something. I just wish that they would have did the cop character a little bit more better. But like I said before, the only character that is really fully developed is Gunnar. I mean, even the mom. There was so much ground you could have covered with the mom. You could have went over her, like, what does she think about, like, her dying, like possibly dying? What does she think about the conflict that's going on between father and son? What does she think about this whole thing about her son going to do this adventure for her? Like, there's not enough. We only see really Rosario just really give a few moments where she'll say some brief things about, oh, it's okay, like, hey, like, you need to talk to your son, but it's never full conversation. She never really gets a monologue for herself. She's really just there in the background and to act as an emotional push for Gunnar to go out and explore the woods.
Yeah, a lot of these characters feel almost like second thoughts, especially Maria Bello's character, the cop. It feels like she is just here just to give exposition, and it feels like Rosario Dawson is just diminished to a plot point to kind of really set Gunnar on this entire cinematic outing that he's going to spend the next 75 minutes of this 90-minute film going on. Outside of these characters, they just don't really bode well, I think, in that regards. There was so much missed opportunity that this film had, and I think most of it is just the handling of its characters and just the mixed tonal messages that it tries to send its audience.
And also, when it comes to even us showing the Waterman, it's so downplayed, it's not even funny. I mean, we just get a scene of this guy who we hardly even see his face. He just has his back turned to the camera and is speaking all gravely and just dark and menacing. And I was like, okay, I thought this Waterman guy was supposed to be a dude who was going around the forest and just healing up animals and doing good. But this guy just seems like almost burnt out and almost as demonic in a sense than what was eventually led on. And maybe that could be the point, that he is essentially living forever, but he's never able to find his wife to resurrect. And so now he has to live forever on this earth with the power to be able to resurrect his wife, but not be able to do it. So maybe that could be the point of why his character was like that. But I just felt that when it got to Waterman, it was just very, very dark and almost turned like horror-ish, if that makes sense.
No, yeah. As a horror fan, the Waterman sequence in particular is one of my favorites in this film for that reason. I think they did a really good job on his design, but the way in which they handle him, he just feels so out of place in this movie, because this movie does just feel, it's a drama at its core, but it also has those fantastical elements, like, say, the end of the Goonies. I know we keep bringing that up, but this film, and it's kind of like the way that it handles the mythology of the Waterman, it feels very much like those, like, the pirates in the Goonies almost. And the treasure maps. And so by the time that you get to the Waterman, he is handled in almost kind of a very, like, Slender Man kind of way, which just feels, again, out of tone for this movie. And this movie, so much of its third act, it just feels consistently like it's just trying to change tone, like cars changing lanes in traffic.
Yeah, it feels like that maybe the writers didn't feel comfortable with how the film was going, even though the film was going on a good track. Maybe they wanted to spice it up a little bit. Maybe they wanted to throw some ideas here and there, or maybe they just wanted to be more complex than initially put on, which I can admire the try. The try is definitely nothing to sneeze at, but it's just the execution and the way that things are handled. It's more of a grand start and less of a compelling finish. It really does go by the numbers, especially towards the ending, where we see that the whole family is all together, sitting at the dinner table, and but hey, I'm pretty sure that when it comes down to the audience for this film, I'm pretty sure that kids were had in mind, and I know for kids, this could be not at the same quality as E.T., but it could be their next E.T. It could be their next Goonies. It could be a film that people are going to find very cute, very whimsical, and a lot of good messages, and they're going to be fans of it. And I support that.
to your point about that scene at the end where they're all sitting around the dinner table, I had flashbacks to like the Full House theme song, where they're all just kind of passing roles at the beginning of this, at the end of that theme song. But so the Waterman opens up everywhere. A May 7th, 2021 from RLJE Pictures in association with Shiv Hans Pictures, Harbo Films, Yorba Saxton Productions. It runs 92 minutes, and like we have said, it is directed and starring David Oyelowo. It is written by Emma Needle and also stars Rosario Dawson, Lonnie Chavis, Amy Amaya Miller, Alfred Molina, and Maria Bello. On our Rorschach rating scale, what does this film land for you, Colas? 0 to 5.
This lands at a solid 3. It's something for me that I probably would not return back to, but there's nothing stopping me from recommending this to someone else. And hey, somebody might even find some value in the way that the third act shifts. And if so, then hey, good for you.
I'm also going to go with the 3 on this one. I feel like it has a really strong start, but unfortunately, it just comes crashing down this third act. The third act is just, it shifts tones too much. It just tries to do a little bit too much. There's a lot of generic and paint-by-numbers elements in this movie. But like you said, Colas, this is not a movie that I would tell people to steer away from, but it's definitely something that I would recommend people checking out, especially if you've been fans of David Oyelowo. It's always good, like you said, to kind of see an artist kind of extend their craft to new areas within that medium, and I think that Oyelowo, as a director, does a much better job in this than some of the other directorial debuts we've covered in the past. Simon Kinberg, Dark Phoenix. But anyways, so for us here at Victims and Villains, we're going to give this a 3 out of 5. But I am going to sound it off with the real reason why we do this show. So thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to our conversation on The Waterman. Celeste, before the people go, where can they find you online?
Well, you can find me, Black Nerd Magic. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, under the same name, Black Nerd Magic. You can find me on Facebook as my real name, Celeste Davis, and that's spelled Caless. You can also find me on Letterboxd if you want to see my film reviews and my ratings on films that I watch each and every day. And also check out my Tumblr. It was a little bit defunct before, but it's back in action again. Super Unfiltered Black Nerd is my handle if you want to check me out on Tumblr.
If you guys could just see the look that I just gave him when he threw out the Tumblr, it's very much meme-worthy, the face that I gave him, because it's been a long time since someone brought up Tumblr, so kudos to you for resurrecting it. I'll throw out my MySpace account. No, I won't. You guys can follow me on Letterboxd on that Captain Nostalgia and check out my film journey. And then we are everywhere at Victims and Villains, wherever you guys get your podcasts from, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And you guys can also go to victimsandvillains.net to find out other episodes, podcasts, movie reviews, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. We'll catch you guys soon. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.